Now that I'm a professor and students are asking me for letters of recommendation, I feel like I have to apologize to all of my mentors and professors from years past for writing letters of recommendation for me because I was that kid who would show up and say, "Can you write a letter for me?" And the professor would say yes. And I would say, "Here are 15 schools. Can you please write for all of them?" I don't know how they dealt with me or why they even put up with me, but thank you. And I'm so sorry. Hey everyone, Professor August here, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to approach faculty members for letters of recommendation. I'm doing this because it happens every semester where students come and they ask me for letters, and of course, sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no, but this is a video to encourage you, yes, to ask, but these are kind of unwritten rules that professors usually have that you won't find in a guide anywhere. There are tons of videos out there and online guides of what to write in an email to ask a professor or like when you should do it and all those things. This is just sort of like unwritten rules from a professor's perspective to say these are the ways you can get me to say yes to writing you a letter of recommendation, or just be comfortable with me saying no and move on to somebody else. There are three things you should remember before you even come to me to ask for a letter of recommendation. Those three things are: do you know if you're asking me for a letter of recommendation or are you asking me for a reference? Those are two separate things. Number two is how many are you asking for? And number three is, are you comfortable with me saying no to you? Because you should be before you even come to me. Now, let's go through all of them. The first thing is, do you know if you're asking for a letter of recommendation or are you asking for a reference? Those are two very different things. This happens every semester. Students will come to me and they say, "I need a reference. Can I list you?" And I'll say, "Sure," because a reference doesn't take any time away from my schedule. A reference is just you listing my name and email address on some form, and then whether it's for financial aid or a program that you're applying to, it's just an email. They'll contact me and say, "Can you verify that this student was in your class?" Or "Can you verify that this student is in good standing at the college?" And it doesn't take time away from my day. I can just say yes and move on. That's what a reference is. But a lot of times, students will think a reference is them listing my email and then asking for a recommendation letter. Recommendation letters are not the same thing. A letter of recommendation takes time out of my day. It's like hours, genuinely. It is hours and hours and hours of me sitting there crafting something specific for you, the student. So if you're asking for a letter of recommendation, make sure that's what it is. If you're asking for a reference, make sure it truly is a reference and not a letter of recommendation. The second thing you should keep in mind is, are you asking for one letter of recommendation or are you asking for 5 letters or 10 letters? There is a lot of consideration that goes into what I write as a professor for you, the student. And if you're asking for one letter of recommendation because you're applying to only California schools and we have common apps, common applications here, so I can produce one letter, upload it into the California system, and then all of the UC, University of California schools have access to it. Okay, that's one letter. But if you're applying to the University of California and California State University and University of Texas and the University of Chicago, those are all different systems. So you're asking for multiple letters of recommendation, and that's going to take me twice as long, 3 times as long, 4 times as long, because Howard University is not the same thing as the University of Texas, and the University of Chicago is not the same thing as Berkeley. So I'm going to write a letter specific to the program that you're applying to, and that's going to take a lot of time. So know how many you're going to actually ask for. And the last thing is, are you okay with me saying no to you? Because if you're not, you should be before you come to a professor. There are tons of reasons we might say no to you. The most common ones are we just don't have time. You're asking too late in the process, or we've already overcommitted and we just know that we're not going to be able to produce a letter for you. And so we'll say no. Another reason might be other people have already asked us to write letters of recommendation for the same program, and we can't dilute what we're saying by writing multiple letters of recommendation for the same program. So if you're applying for a grant or a fellowship, or you're applying for a job, or you're applying for a transfer program, and 2 other people have already asked me, and you're the third one asking for the same program, chances are I'm just going to say no, because not everybody is going to be this outstanding stellar student in my letter. One is going to outshine the others. And so it's going to be unfair for me to say yes to you, knowing that I'm not going to be able to write the most stellar letter for you. And then there are other reasons. I might look at your transcripts and say, you may have done really well in my class, but your GPA shows that other programs are not going to take your application seriously. So I'm probably not the best person to write a letter for you. Or you didn't do well in my class, and I'm not going to have anything really substantial to say other than Susie showed up to class and did the work and passed. If that's the letter I write, it would be really damning for you, the student, because whoever's looking at that application will say something happened here. Either the professor knows something that they didn't put in the letter, uh, the student was not organized to approach the faculty member early enough to write a letter, the professor doesn't know the student well enough to be able to craft a letter. So it would be even more damning for me to just say, this is a good student, and then sign my name to it, because people who read the applications know what that means. I don't even have to be mean in the letter. They just know that, a mediocre letter is just like a big no-no. So if I have any of those reasons to say no, I will say no. And you have to be comfortable with that and just approach somebody else. Okay, so you've considered those three things before you even approach your professor. Now that you've considered those three things and you know what you're applying to and when you're applying to them and you're comfortable being told no, then you come to the professor, either in person or by email, and you say, Dr. August, I'm applying to these three programs. Are you comfortable writing a comprehensive, strong letter of recommendation on my behalf? These are the three programs, and these are the deadlines. And I will respond to you with a tentative yes. Okay. If I have no reason to say no, it's a tentative yes, which means now that I have said I'll consider it, then you have to produce a portfolio for me so I can actually write the letter of recommendation. There are a couple of things that have to go in this portfolio. You can do this any way you want to. So you can just print the stuff out and hand it to me, or you can create a Dropbox folder, or you can create a Google Drive folder. But these are the four things that I have to see inside of your portfolio before I can actually truly say yes to you in writing a letter of recommendation. The first thing is I need a cover letter or a statement of purpose or the answers to the questions that the application is asking you so I can see what you're writing. The second thing is your CV or your resume. The third thing is your academic transcript. And the fourth thing is an Excel sheet with the program, the deadline, and just one sentence about why you're applying to that specific program. So Susie comes to me and says, Dr. August, I'm applying to these three programs. Would you be able to write a strong letter of recommendation for me? And I would say, yeah, I think so. Why don't you send me your portfolio and I'll take a look? And so she sends me those four things in a Dropbox folder, and I'll take a look and I'll say, now that I've read Susie's cover letter and I've looked at Susie's CV or resume, I know what Susie's all about. Susie was a strong student in my class. I'm going to take a look at her transcript and see that Susie has a 4.0 GPA. And then I'm going to open the Excel sheet to see what programs Susie is applying to. And she's applying to three programs that seem relatively okay as programs, but I'm going to have a conversation with Susie and say, hey, why are you applying to these three schools when you have the academic rigor and background to go to the University of Chicago, or you can go to Berkeley, or you can go to Yale? Why aren't you applying to those schools? What's holding you back? So I'll have a conversation with them. Or the reverse might happen. I might look at Susie's transcripts and say, damn, she did really well in my class, but she's a 2.0 student and she's applying to these really elite programs. I'm not going to be able to waste my time writing a letter of recommendation. I should have a conversation with her to see if she has any backup schools that I feel more comfortable writing for. So, okay, so let's go through each of these things. The cover letter or personal statement or the answers to the questions that they're asking you in the application, I just need to see those so that I know where your head is at. It doesn't have to be the final draft. If your deadline is in December and you're asking me in September, you're probably not going to have the final draft of this thing ready. I just need to see that there is something. You've given it some thought about what you're going to say. That'll also help me produce a letter that is tailored to you as a student. The CV or the resume does the same thing. I just need to see like who you are in one sheet of paper or two sheets of paper. I don't know what the rule is these days. I think when I submitted my applications, I was like 15 pages or something. I don't think they do it that way anymore. But I just need to see what you're writing and who you are and how you boil yourself down on a CV or a resume. The transcript is really important because, again, I need to see how you're doing academically, not just in my classes, but in all the other courses. And I need to compare that to the programs that you're applying to. And then the last thing, the Excel sheet, the reason I need that is if it's just one program that you're applying to, I can sort of gauge whether or not it's worth my time or your time even applying to that program. But if you're applying to multiple programs, let's say you're applying to 5 different schools or 5 different fellowships or jobs, and other students have also approached me, I'll be able to compare your lists and say, hey, John showed up and said he's applying to these 5 schools. And then Mary showed up and she's applying to these 4 schools. And then Susie showed up and she was the third one to show up, but she's applying to 2 of the same schools as the other people are applying to. I'll say, hey, I'll be able to write a letter of recommendation for one of these programs, but these two I don't feel comfortable writing for because I've already said yes to these other students. That is just a timeline issue, right? So I can't morally uh, make everybody sound like they're the best student. I can't do that personally. There are faculty who will, but I'm not going to be able to sit there and say, John, Mary, and Susie, each of them is unique and they're all number one in my class, because they're not. So timing is an issue here. So the earlier students come to me, the better it is. So now that you know those 4 things need to be in the folder, and you approach a faculty member, still be comfortable with them saying, maybe not. I can't in good conscience write you a letter of recommendation. One last thing I'll mention here is timing and timeline. If your deadline is in December, don't come to me like the week of Thanksgiving and ask for a letter of recommendation, because chances are I'm just going to say no, because there's no time to produce it. I need a month, 2 months, 3 months heads up, because writing a letter of recommendation takes half a day for one school. If you're applying to like 3 schools, that's my weekend. And so I have to plan way in advance to be able to produce letters of recommendation. They are they're emotionally taxing, they're tedious to produce. Every college and university has a different website template that we need to follow, and so it does take time and research on the part of the professor to actually produce a good letter for you. And so the earlier you come to a professor, the better it is. Some schools have rolling applications, so like you might be applying in April. Well, come to me in January and just tell me, hey, I'm going to be applying in April. First of all, can you do it? And if I give you a tentative yes, then produce your portfolio and send that to me. But timing is a huge issue here, because a week is not enough time. 3 days is not enough time. It does happen once in a while. And this happened to me when I was a student in Southern California for undergraduate, where I was up for an award and I needed letters of recommendation, and one of the letters was just not going to cut it for me. And I was in a jam. We needed somebody else to step up with like a day to go to produce a letter. And in those instances, professors can reach out to other professors and say, hey, this student is a good student. They're in a tough position. Can you help resolve the problem? And so in those instances, yes, if you're in a huge jam and the deadline's coming up and you just need somebody to produce something, yeah, you can approach us and say like, I'm in this bind. But I'm probably going to verify that by going and talking to your other recommenders or the other person who backed out to say like, what happened here? Why aren't you doing it? Sometimes a student will approach me like with a week to go, and my first question is, why are you coming to me so late? Did you not know you were applying, or were you just not prepared to apply? And a lot of times I get answers like, I was so busy with work, and my boyfriend broke up with me, and my grandma got hit by a bus, and my dog died. I mean, like, on and on and on. I can't help you in those situations, because those are sort of life situations that everybody goes through, and you should have planned way in advance, because I can't take a half day off to be able to produce something for you. Okay, so those are things you need to keep in mind when you're approaching faculty. Those are my rules. I think those are sort of like unspoken rules that a lot of professors have and a lot of teachers have, and they may not have made that clear to you. And you'll approach them and they'll just say no, and you'll feel really bad. Don't feel bad. They're just kind of like rules that we have in our head, and these are mine. So, if you're following them and you approach me early enough and you've done well in my class and in other classes, and I have something substantial to say about you, chances are I'll say yes and write you a letter of recommendation. But, if I've never talked to you outside of class and you never showed up to office hours, or you only took an online course and I never corresponded with you, I'm not going to be able to produce a good letter of recommendation. And so I'll probably just say no. But just for transparency and like how this process works, these are the things that are in my head. All right, I hope this helps. And if you guys have questions, pop them in the comment section below and I'll answer them. Otherwise, good luck with applications to different programs and different schools and different grants and fellowships and jobs. It's rough out there. We all know that it is, but hang in there. Something usually pops up. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. Catch you in the next video.